Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us at another event on the live event of the Cyber Risk Governance. Thank you very much for joining us during the holiday season. We know that you're busy. So without further ado, I'm Stanley Lee, founder and CEO of NetSwitch and Securely. And with me here is Pete and Sean. And Sean, why don't you make the formal introductions on Pete?
All right, sure, happy to. Today we have Peter Leshenek joining us. He's a seasoned cybersecurity, information security, and GRC professional, often speaking to executives about how risk management needs to be integrated, bringing the cyber into enterprise risk management, a topic Stanley and I have talked about often. Pete, thanks for joining us today to talk about your experience and recommendations for people.
Well, thank you very much, Sean and Stanley, for the introduction. Now, a little bit about myself. I come from the world of infrastructure way back when, in systems that are long dead, some of them for good reason, but got pulled into the risk management world about 20 something years ago, working at different aspects of it, when people really didn't have a good head on their shoulders about what does risk really mean.
Right.
They knew it from the business sense, and I've been in the financial services for the last 25 years and was asked to take on a number of roles as regulators and examiners required certain things like change management, later incident problem management, and then as it developed, getting into cybersecurity on the first line and second line, working with the different lines. It's something that brings me here today and where I've had my success to really help tell that narrative and the story of what does it really mean, rather than here's how we stand, why do we care is much more important.
Right.
Thank you,
Right.
Pete. And just to remind our audience a little bit, we have invited another guest at our another live event, which you can go back into YouTube, search for NetSwitch Cyber Risk Governance, and we have invited Steve Walker and talked about from an examiner perspective. So now it's the other side is the operation, the
The victim
everyday,
side.
yeah. And we also, on the podcast, in which we will touch on more about the left of boom and the right of boom. So these are the things that we're going to try to, today we're going to work with Pete and try to explain how can we turn the technology thing into risk management, because that's at the end of the day, that's what the executive would understand more, and they would open up the wallet and try to budget it from a risk management perspective. And why cyber risk governance? A lot of new member has been asking me about this question: why cyber risk governance? Cyber is cybersecurity. Risk is really risk management, and governance is what we know as a GRC: governance, risk, and compliance.
Right.
This is the time that why we need to put it into a more holistic perspective and looking at what I just talked about, the left of boom, right of boom, and also coming from a compliance evidence perspective and driving this type of conversations and including cultural changes with expert like Pete, that who actually practiced this for the last 20 years. So this is not just talking, this is real experience. So Pete, yes, fire away. The first thing that we talked about is the three lines of defense. How do you break down those silo I just talked about? A lot of people come back and say, no, cybersecurity, it's all my baby. It's all about technical. How do we look at all these tools? But unfortunately, this is not the real world works. It's not about just technology or risk management. It's going from top down and bottom up. How do we gather all these data to make it more operational effective? So start with the three lines of defenses.
That's great. In fact, you steal a little of my thunder right there because you
Oh,
hit the
sorry
right thing.
about that.
It's about breaking down those walls and the barriers. People think traditionally of the three lines as completely self-contained, autonomous units that are going to interact only at key decision points or outcomes, and that's really not how the real world will work. That's not how you want to work. It's a cooperative. It's about how
Mm,
well do we each understand what the other is trying to do. Being the first line is operating the environment. Second line is going to challenge about how they do it. Do they think it's sufficient? Do they even know how to challenge it? Are they asking the right question? And the third is your audit function. Everybody feels, I understand an auditor, internal or external, but sometimes the auditor isn't always asking the right question. That's looking, do you follow the rules that you've laid out for yourselves? Are you adhering to them? And the second line should question the rules. Are they sufficient? But you want the third line doing that too. I will tell you, and probably jumping ahead on myself a little bit, it's something examiners are starting to ask a lot of questions. Is the second and third line really taking an active interest in how that first line is working? Not just to make the business happy, but to make the business safe and safe
Mhm.
from itself when necessary. And when they feel that it's insufficient, that they don't really interrogate the first line well enough, or even the second line, challenge where they've gone. Do they think they've really upped their game enough? They're the ones holding those dreaded MRIAs that'll come out of from the Fed or something equivalent from another. You don't want to really isolate your business because you weren't hard enough on yourself. We exist independently. So when I take a look at it, and was where I came into the problem about 15 years ago, after doing change and incident, was brought into cybersecurity, and we start thinking, well, cybersecurity is this unique animal. It's completely different than infrastructure. It's different than the applications. And the more you look at it, he goes, no, really, it's infrastructure and application together. And sometimes it's designing how applications should work or infrastructure should work and needs those teams involved. We don't want to have just this blue sky opinion of what good looks like without ever considering, is it actually feasible? Is it sustainable? Is it even profitable in the end? You hit it
Right.
earlier on about that whole ROI concept is we can make the perfect environment, but is it financially intelligent to do it? And it just may be so cost prohibitive that maybe we should change our business model a little bit to make it work. But coming back, so when I come into it and we start working the problem of how should controls work, how should they interrelate with risks, is to understand what's the risk, who owns the risk, remembering that, and what is the control for. And the risk are all these things I worry about. I being the business, being the stakeholders, the shareholders, the external entities that work with us, they're the ones that are worrying about the bottom line, their bottom line. Will we stay profitable? Will we stay effective and then sustainable? And are we doing it in a way that morally and ethically right? Sometimes people forget about the morals behind our ethics. You know, somebody once told me the way you can define the difference between ethics and morals, ethics are what you do, and the morals are what you do when nobody's looking. And if you're working in that black box, are you really keeping your ethics? And we all we have to do is turn the clock back to 2008, 2007, 2006, the lead up to the crash in '09. Were we
Mhm.
always working in the best interest of
Right.
our clients? Were we true fiduciaries? And it doesn't just have to be financial. It's whatever you're doing. Are you considering their best interest? And that's how we build controls. So risks are established by those groups. They're codified in the financial services world by the second line in conjunction with the business. The business owns the risk. They are
Right.
just a mouthpiece, so to speak, for them and to
Right.
help protect them. And that's not just technology second line, that's all of the second line. That's your operational risk, your regulatory risk, all of it's coming together. What do we worry about? What's that oh my God moment? And did they think big enough? And the controls
Great
that we're
introduction.
developing. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
so
go ahead.
this is one thing. No, no, that this is perfect because one thing that you touch on that, of course, hit my soft spot, which is as a technologist all these years, you telling me that as a technologist, that I gotta focus on fixing all these technology things because you're coming from a risk management point of view. You're fixing.
Right.
Great. We working in exactly what you pointed out earlier. It becomes a black box environment for a lot of executive. But that isn't that your mandate to me as I'm a cybersecurity guy and I just come in here or gal and come in here and fixing things and operating. you know, business objective is something that we don't get trained in the school, and of course that's a problem on its own. Now we're trying to fix
Right.
this, you know, as part of our community member, we try to fix that with the educational institutes, and actually try to put risk management as part of the discussions. And people, we have been talking about NIST 8286 as, you know, how do you turn it into a risk register and then risk profile, and then of course let the organization based on their risk appetite to decide what kind of quantification that they need to work on, or define it as you touched on as a mathematic equation, right? But from a technical point of view, going back into that black box environment, what you told us as a business executive or the board of director, you mandate us we need to fix cybersecurity, and that's what we do. So we go out and fix the cybersecurity, the technical issues. But it has never been, from my experience in the last 22 years, most of the C-suite never come and tell us that we got to look at it from a risk management perspective. And this is where why we, you know, come to this kind of building this community. And you know, our responsibility is not just educating the people that who is currently in the industry, but people who also coming into the industry. What would you tell them? Oh, all of a sudden now my degree doesn't work anymore because I learned all these technical aspect of things. Tell me, you know, please let me know. And of course, AI, we got to touch on AI because a lot of
Sure.
things going into the AI direction as well. How do you correlate? And that's what we talking about. How do you provide that contextual correlations to drive this type of cultural changes within an organization?
So you hit a few different questions which I want to break down, and
I
the
always
real
do.
legitimate is that everybody has a whole lot of questions in their mind, and
Yeah.
where do you start first? And
Yeah.
one of the first questions you would ask about is, how do I have a business mindset if I've been a trained technologist my whole life? And
Right.
I've been told to make it bigger, make it faster, make it sleeker, make it sexy, whatever
Make it
phrase you
cheaper.
want to hear, make
Make
it
it cheaper.
cheaper. You know, we always tell them you can have two of those three things, pick which
That's
ones you
right.
want.
That's
Right.
right.
And you're going to be disappointed in one of them. Is place I was, you know, I'm not trying to drop the name. People can look at my LinkedIn profile, see where I worked. One of the first things they did when I'd come there, and when I came there, it was a rare thing to come in as an officer. And usually you had to grow up in the firm. They liked it
Mm.
for continuity to build the people as they get them out of college and have them grow. But they needed something unique, which is where I came over. And it wasn't just for myself, it was for the whole division. I worked in investment research on the technical side. And they said, you know what? Everybody here needs to understand what the business here is about.
Mm.
So all of us were sent to accounting classes and to actually learn what EBITDA means and all these things. So you have an appreciation for the business cycle and the business importance. And they were doing it throughout the firm is learn the business either through brown bag lunches or other or formal training. Understand what you're doing while you're helping it. It's you're building a rocket for a purpose. You want to get to the moon and you build a rocket for the moon. If you want to get to low Earth orbit, and I say this because I originally want to be an astronaut, and you can see how well that worked out. I didn't come close to it. Is But the idea is you build to the mission. And if I'm building a space station in low Earth orbit, I don't need something that gets to the moon. I don't need to consider, well, you're going to be on your own for 2 weeks. So is everything there? Well, no, if I put in low Earth orbit, I can bring stuff up. I can talk to you in real time. The lag isn't a big deal. I don't have to worry. So that changes my risk profile.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same in here. So you have to think about the risk profile you mentioned. What do I care about? Why do I care about it? And what could happen when I stop caring? If it's not that big a deal, well, that's how you prioritize. It's just not important. The cafeteria menu system, do I need to secure it and have it on the best application in the firm? Probably not, unless I got all my executives working late and all the people supporting them, and now they're all hungry and they're distracted. So it becomes time bound. But for the most part, it's not the biggest as my settlement system, as my payment system, as my trading systems. That's the heart of a firm. If I'm making cars, I care about building cars. I don't care about certain other things. So what do you do when you build a car? They outsource who makes the radio. We don't make radios, we incorporate them. Well, the
Right.
same thing in our business. We are not building the tools of cybersecurity, we buy them. We buy a Tanium, we buy a CrowdStrike, we buy whatever we need that works based on how it's well respected in the industry and then incorporate it. So you hit a second point is, well, I have all these tools. We want to make sure we just don't keep gathering tools, that we're actually thinking about how to use it. Otherwise, we get the favorite tool bloat. We have 15 different ways to measure the same thing, and I'm paying 15 different license fees, and I'm
Right.
training staff in 15 different approaches. Maybe that's too much. Yes, it's perfect, but it's a perfect case of a crash, right? Because I won't know what to fix first. So we go maybe a little more limited, but we go deep. And it doesn't mean I buy one product for everything. If you think about how NIST is evolving, it added two things recently.
Right.
One, governance.
Mm-hmm.
So NIST added that sixth domain. We need governance out there so people realize that somebody has to watch the shop and ensure
That's
it's
right.
right. And the other part was the whole resiliency idea. And people mistake resiliency for backup and disaster recovery. And they
Yeah.
are two distinct things. And when I look at a cyber model, in the resiliency, it's how much have I created compartmentalization so I could remove things. So I'm not one tool solves everything, and then CrowdStrike goes south and nothing works.
Right.
Well, then I
That's
use
right.
CrowdStrike in one place, and I use Defender in another, and maybe I have overlap, but I have more security, and I can unplug myself from one tool and work on the other. I don't want to ski blind, but I want to change my skis every now and again.
Right.
We keep throwing different analogies. I live on analogies.
which is easy
Pete,
to
let me touch on
explain.
something real quick. Yeah. You were just talking about how you were brought in to help the technical side understand the business objectives. What's the mission? Were you responsible for the conversation in the other direction? For the
So,
non-technical executives to understand the technical aspects of security and how it's applied and understanding what they do on that side.
so that's a great question. So over my career, at first, it was we'll give you the instruction of what you want. We want you to build, and we'll tell you that it's good. And it's a one-sided conversation at some point. And I'd say over the last 15 years, technology, especially cyber, has elevated itself to a C-suite level. Not always having the CISO report into the CTO, reporting into something else. I know some CISOs are now part of legal, that they're coming away from it. They're a technical role on the business side, or they're totally independent of it. It all depends on the organization, and the idea being they need to have that seat to explain it. I was at a bank where I'm meeting with the board of directors quarterly, and they want to hear in their quarterly update to know they meet each area of the business, and they want to be able to understand first, how do I see the business? And how do I see the cyber risks that the business is facing? Are they facing it right? And when I learned to help educate them, you have to give it in reference to their competitors as well.
That's
When they
right.
hear a number that sounds terrible, when you realize, oh, it's about 1/100th of what the industry faces, oh, then the payment that we're making is worthwhile for us. And I get to correct that. Is it worthwhile? Are we lucky or are we secure? And on the other side is to help them understand even their own rules. I ran into a case, I won't say the bank, but they didn't understand what GDPR meant and how that affects the Bank in America who has European clients.
Oh, goodness
And
gracious.
a little frightening, but to
Yeah.
actually be able to illustrate that I shouldn't have to be the one correcting the thought there of a senior board member,
Yep.
but that's also what we're part of, to make sure they understand what it is they're doing and why do we care.
That's
Because the
right.
And
moment you
you're
forget
right on
about the
because yesterday, sorry, but yesterday I had a conversation with one of, well, actually, it's the largest retail company, of course, without naming any names. And actually, if it's an attorney within a segment of that largest retail company, and we touch on oversight. And now it becomes the driving force. And in fact, that most of the cybersecurity spending is now 70%. And one of the research I found is driving the cybersecurity spending. It's all focusing on the compliance and the oversight. So you touch on working with the legal, and this is why we have more guests talking about from a legal perspective. But now put it back on the other side. From a legal perspective, you got the interpretation coming from the top down, GRC focus, business
Mhm.
oriented focus, ROI focus. But then go back into the bottom up from the cybersecurity perspective, and the compliance officers needs to define the controls and subcontrol. How can they drive this type of messy communications into something that they can all agree on, so they can approach it in a holistic way? And this is, I think, that you have shared with me some of your secret
Sure.
sauces that that you talked about. And yeah, and please share that with our
And you can
audience.
even bring up that one slide. I call it less secret sauce
Perfect.
and more thinking through the problem space. This is
Perfect.
something I worked on for a number of years. And the way you build something like this, what I call the security risk life cycle, is to work with the different teams that will get involved, from those that set the rules, those that enforce the rules, those that implement the controls, so they understand what it is each one's doing and why. You start off with, I need an asset management inventory. Honestly, I'll tell them I don't want to hear about a spreadsheet someone has. It's got to be centrally located and managed. So you don't want it fungible, so that it stays consistent. The other part I want to have, what are our rules and our guidelines and our processes? So when we talk about policy standards, procedures, are they documented? Are they laid out? Are, at least when you get to the procedure level, are they mutually exclusive? So it's only talking about one thing at a time, not 10 things in one sentence. And you never know which one it is that you're doing. And I know, Sean, it'll always sound funny when people say just make them exclusive. It should be obvious.
Yep.
What I see happen is people will put all of like identity and access management into one statement. Nobody should be given access that's not authorized. They should know who the person is. On top of that, they should be doing timely reviews and removal of access that's not necessary. You put that one statement. Now I got 5 different things in there. When
Right.
one piece of the 5 doesn't work, the whole thing fails. When actually it was only one place, but they didn't break it down between access control, identity management, recertification, lever activity, all these little things that should be obvious, but they're each one a separate little component, even if they work together. You want to know, like Stanley, you called the subcontrols. Exactly right. Do they function? And the idea here, when you start at that top row to do the daily measurement, is I want to have all those rules broken out. They shouldn't be complicated. My policies shouldn't be changing every day. They should be like concrete. Concrete, once it cracks, it's no good anymore. The standards may change more frequently. The processes underneath it will change very frequently because I'm going to buy different tools. I'm going to make them stricter controls, whatever it is. So I've got all that laid out in some sort of readable format. I'm going to marry it up to the telemetry and the data coming that I'm measuring on how each one performs. If I don't want unauthorized access, that's a risk. That's a good risk to know about. How do you prevent it? Well, only people who are granted access should get access. Good. How do you establish that? The tool uses in the process level, but I've now said the how do I do it? So if it's an action, I should measure it. And when I measure the performance with the controls, through that continuous controls monitoring, I'm going to pop out with 2 answers. Either you did it right or you did it wrong. And if it went wrong, we called it a control defect. Something varied off the standard. People call it many different things. We settled on defect. And the idea is as I get defects, then I have to figure out what do they mean? Because the defect splits into 2 things. Is it allowed behavior that I've accepted this one beforehand because I know it can't be fixed or it's cost prohibitive? Or is it unexpected behavior? And the unexpected goes on between that, where it's assigning resolve. Who owns this? What do they do to fix that? Because they're just repairing a break. They're not making it better. They're just repairing. And when I see a systemic problem or a thing that can't be fixed, I want to go into problem management. This is from the old incident days of system phase. It still worked well here. Is what was the cause behind it? And how am I going to mitigate it over the long term? And if I can't mitigate it, I'll go into and call it residual risk. And I'm going to have to decide how to deal with it, which is the bottom level. And the idea is I want to try to fix as much as I can, but that whole assigning and resolving, that's where people were getting stuck. You treated everything the same. In this world, everything is not equal. I said earlier,
Mhm.
the cafeteria system for ordering lunch is not the same as my transaction processing overnight. One of them will end the economy, as we've seen. One of them will make people grumpy. Really shouldn't have that long lasting an effect. When I'm looking at those, I'm going to risk rate them, not just high, medium, low, but go a little bit deeper about how important it is to the business. And the business is the one that helps decide which applications, which data sets are important to them. The data sets decided by the application. That's all in that asset database we talked about. So I know the what does this do, and it marries it up to what infrastructure is it on, and that's the key of a CMDB, that configuration management database that we need. There were a lot of things that people were putting into those. I think some of them they're nice to have, but they're superfluous. What NIC cards are in them, what processes are in them. Okay, that's good, but that's not really helping you decide what's most important. It's really about vulnerability management at that point. And if you notice, I'm not talking about vulnerability. This is separate. This is
Right.
each control. And every control I do, whether it's an access control, it's a monitoring control, so I can watch the environment, it's how a database is encrypted. All these things, if they're measurable, they're monitorable, and I'm going to look at them every day. I'm not going to wait for 3 months or a year to do it. I should look at everything, everywhere, every day. And we were looking at about 150,000 endpoints for 40 tests every day. So you are talking in the millions of possible outcomes each day. All that stuff comes together and it would go to a transparency layer. I want to be able to present it to people. Something where they're not having to pull data out themselves. It's showing everybody. Here's the top down, how much good, how much bad, how much is authorized that's bad, doesn't make it good. Some people fall into that trap thinking, but I authorized it. Okay, you authorized me to be bad. It's still bad. If a regulator comes in, if an auditor comes in, they're going to say it's either good or bad. There is no in between. You want to show that layer from the highest level down to the individual grains. And I want to see the good. And then I also want to find out, because I'm measuring and I'm being smart here, am I finding things that aren't in that CMDB?
Mm.
Are things reporting that I don't know about? And then I got to think about rogue devices. Did somebody put something online that looks like it works right but doesn't exist? Either with negligence to put it in or it was intentional. I was at a place once where uh, security guards that worked in the parking lot didn't like the fact that these handheld security scanners that they would use, they would read UPC codes, weren't working in certain parts of the parking lot underground. So they put a router they picked up at Best Buy out there, plugged it in, it connected to the network by itself, and it extended the range of their things. Now we see in cyber all of a sudden, hey, there's a device joining my network that's pinging other things through the Wi-Fi. I don't know what it is. And that's where I learned the first time that you could take two wireless routers and use them to triangulate a third. I didn't know you could do that and find out exactly where it is within a few feet. So they found out where it is and yanked it out of the parking lot wall where they plugged it in, because that thing is piggybacking onto the network. It's a rogue device.
Yeah.
Remove it. And we've done that in places where you have to give authority from the top down to enforce that. If I see a database that doesn't show up as existing, I can stomp on it. I can remove it. If I see a server that doesn't belong, if I see a laptop connecting, I don't know its intent. And if it was for all the best reasons, well, then they should have made sure it was recorded right. I can't have
That's right.
rogue devices. I have to err on the side of caution. And I know I'm going a bit before I go
No,
on.
no, no, but is perfect because this
Then
is
I
what lays the ground for a lot of our audience, which is on the SM, B's, small mid-sized businesses.
yep,
And the questions that I want, yes, you worked in, so not many company has 150,000 employees. Okay, so this is where that it comes back into our general audience, which like, okay, if I don't have the resource, what is your recommendation, Pete? That based
sure,
on what you just talked about as a transparency, which is we look at it as a equivalent of NIST's 82, 86 as a risk register. I don't have the budget. Great, everything sounds wonderful, but I don't have the budget. And now cybersecurity is kind of put it into a cybersecurity black hole environment because a lot of spending has keep repeating. The business executive and the board, they know they gotta have it, but they don't know how to measure it and monitoring it. What would you do as a mid-sized company? Doesn't matter what industry or you are in, but how do you turn this technical part into the risk management part?
sure. You know,